Welcome to the Future of Internal Communication podcast. I'm Jen Sproul, CEO of the Institute of Internal Communication. Since we launched this series in 2021, the world of work has been disrupted by event after event. A pandemic, geopolitics, AI, extreme weather events, remote and hybrid working, generational shifts, inclusion, diversity. The entire nature of how we work needs transformation. This podcast explores opportunities for internal communication in the future of work. Internal comms is a critical function that helps organisations achieve lasting change, building trust and relationship between people in pursuit of shared goals. Please join me, Dominic Walters, and Kat Barnard as we dissect what this means for internal communication. With relentless change the new normal, it's time to reimagine our profession.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Future of Internal Communication podcast. I'm Kat Barnard and today I am joined by Jen Sproul. Dominic is off gadding somewhere on annual leave and so it's just us. You'll have to place yourselves in our capable hands. Today, we've got an interesting topic, I think, to talk about. We are going to be talking about how we might create safer communication at work. So the backstory to this conversation is that late last year, Dominic and I were invited to speak at a conference hosted by the Asian Fire Service Association. And right off the top of my head, what we spoke about actually eludes me. I think it was something about active listening and creating spaces where more inclusive conversations could take place. And after we had spoken, a lovely gentleman came up to me, one of our guests today, Shaun Keep, and he and I got into a conversation and he started to tell me about an organisation that he has set up with his business partner and with a whole host of experience in a range of different areas. Both Shaun Keep and Paul Adams are passionate about creating safer places for people to be able to speak up and voice concerns that they have. And I think it's a really apposite subject as we continue into 2025 and are finding that a rising HR concern is that people at work are feeling uncomfortable with having uncomfortable conversations with one another. And I think as internal communicators, that absolutely falls into our sweet spot of being able to create these safe spaces. So I'm going to do a brief intro and then I'm going to invite Shaun and Paul to give a bit more backstory on each of their careers. But briefly, Shaun Keep and Paul Adams have worked as safeguarding professionals. They both served in the police force for more than 30 years, specialising in areas such as child protection, anti-corruption, major crime investigations, etc. But a lot of experience accumulated over those 3 decades in interview techniques with delicate situations, so interviewing of suspects, victims, survivors, vulnerable adults, vulnerable children, etc. And they've taken that experience and gone on to set up their company called Say So, which is a culmination of that professional expertise and some passion projects that have played out along the side. And I don't want to do any of that a disservice. So I'm literally going to hand over to Shaun first and then Paul second to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and to ask you to share more with our listeners about Say So and why each of you wanted to set it up and what it works to achieve today, what its goals are. So I'll go to you, Shaun, first.
Catherine, thanks very much. And Jen, thanks for giving us the time today and talking about this subject. As you said, it is passionate. We are passionate about this. And I suppose it comes from several decades, as you say, of public service, dealing with vulnerable people, trying to investigate offences against vulnerable people, trying to keep them safe, and obviously trying to get justice as well. But most of all, what justice is actually giving a voice to a victim, actually getting their plight heard somewhere and getting it dealt with. So I suppose when we left the police, or certainly from my point of view, when I left the police back in 2015, we went on a project, or I went on a project down in the Surrey police area to look at, review some what we called serious care failures. And that is where people in residential care settings their allegations of abuse or neglect arose, okay, to such a level that it went to the local police to investigate. And what they wanted us to do in this small project was just to look at and see if we can find any gaps of service, any improvements that were possible in the investigation, etc. But we did all of that. But the most important thing we found was that of the 125 that we were asked to look at, in 65% of those cases, staff knew things were going wrong in advance of that major critical incident happening, but they didn't report it. And Paul and I, we were on the project together. I'm sure Paul will explain his motivation separately, but it's pretty much aligned with mine. We felt that as safeguarding professionals, we must be able to do something about this. We must be able to find a way of allowing staff in care homes in particular, but we've learned now that actually the circumstances of staff not speaking up in care homes is pretty similar in any organisation at the end of the day. But so we started Say So. We thought, right, okay, let's use some of the skills and experience that we've used before in the police. Let's use some of that expertise. We obviously know how to keep data secure. We know how to manage the identities of people who don't want their identity known. We know how to do that. We know how to talk to people, we believe, to give them as much confidence as possible to tell us as much as is needed for an investigation to carry out. But the biggest thing we felt we needed to do was to build that trust and confidence, because when we did speak to people in those care homes, and with some consultation that we did afterwards, we found that there were some four reasons why they didn't speak up, okay? They felt mainly that they would lose their job. That was their biggest fear. If I speak up and rock the boat, they'd lose their job. They might, if not lose their job, they may be treated badly by their employer. They wouldn't get the shifts they want. They wouldn't get the overtime they want. They wouldn't perhaps progress through the organisation. They'd be labelled a troublemaker and pushed aside effectively, okay? They might be bullied by their colleagues. Their colleagues might sort of say, well, we've always done it this way. Whatever it is you're reporting, we've always done it this way. So you're now outside of our little clique. You'll be treated separately, might even be bullied, etc. And one of the other main reasons, and there were four main ones, although there are several others, but there are main reasons. The fourth one was, I've got enough going on in my private life. I've got caring responsibilities. I've got children. I've got, a hectic, busy and stressful private life. The last thing I want to do is to make my work life stressful by raising an issue and therefore coming under scrutiny, being whispered about, pointed out in the staff room or whatever. So, it was him or her that caused the fuss. Some people just don't want that and can't cope with that level of stress. So we built Say So. What we was trying to do was focus into the care sector, that health and care sector. That's where we wanted to go. We felt it was needed. And away we went. Marketing into the care sector. We built a website. We built a website that can cope with data, etc., securely. Obviously, all of the leaflets and posters, etc. But one of the things that we thought we'd do is go and talk to the staff personally, because it's that personal touch, we believe, that creates that trust and confidence, that personal interaction, knowing what motivates people, knowing why they started, knowing what they're passionate about, and knowing the methodology around how we keep people safe if they were to report something. I seem to be hogging the limelight now.
No, you're not.
I pass over?
You absolutely can, but I just want to. I think that's such an important point just to say, and I absolutely do want to hear Paul's story as well. But what a breath of fresh air to go and speak to people personally, to actually take the time to meet them and bear witness to their stories, because it's such an antidote to the chatbot enabled digital vortex in which we're all kind of just cogs now. So how lovely. I love that.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that bit, Kat, I was going to cover that bit, is like, we stand up in front of all the people that work within the organisation and we say, look, this is us. This is who we are. This is why we're here. This is what we've done. In the fire service, for example, when we progressed into that, we thought there might be a bit of disdain because many years ago, relationships were with firefighters and police officers as emergency services was often quite conflicting. But we stood up and said, look, this is us. This is why we're doing it. And that's what made all the difference. But the huge gulf between the understanding coming from the senior leaders to recognise that that makes such a difference. Because what we're doing is we're building a relationship, and life is all about building relationships. Whatever you do in life, it's about relationships, isn't it, really, if you think about any aspect of life?
It really, really is. And I think that's very much what this podcast seeks to address is we're in uncharted territory. And the only thing that is going to get us through, because there is no rule book, there's no playbook for any of the challenges that we face now systemically, but the only thing that is going to see us through is relationship. And I know that before we came on air, Paul, you shared a little bit about what it was that you felt so strongly about, you know, a bit of your backstory and experience that led you to want to set up the business. And running a business is not easy, is it? It's not easy. So please tell our listeners what led you on this pathway.
Obviously, meeting Shaun was a key part of it, because we were very much on the same page. We were very much sort of similar ages, had similar experiences in the police force, and it was very clear that both of us were determined to try and make a difference as a result of this little encounter with the care reviews that we were doing. But for me, it hit a note a little bit more sort of detailed in depth than that desire was based on my own experience. I think if you spoke to many retired police officers, or there will have been occasions in their life when they weren't listened to. And a big part of the values that Say So bring is really letting people know and understand and believe that by using this service, you will be listened to, because that's an important part of it. It's one thing speaking up, isn't it? If that was the end of it, then we would never have made the progress that we have in so many industries. But the people need to listen to those individuals. And as a result of listening, then if need be, take whatever positive action needs to be taken to, or become aware of it, or change processes, or endear themselves more to individuals that may be struggling. So listening is a big part of it. And through my career, on many occasions, I had encounters where I wasn't listened to, and I felt very strongly about different things. And one particular incident that I won't necessarily go into, but it was sort of halfway through my career where I wasn't listened to, and because there was no sort of truth to power, the result was catastrophic. It was catastrophic for me as an individual, because I felt responsible. It was catastrophic for the people involved. And I carried the burden of that for many years, of not being listened to, and when I was trying to do the right thing. And so whatever the shortfall was of the individual that was a recipient of what went wrong is one thing, but then when you move your life on, you always resort back to that. You think, well, I'm not going to not be listened to again. If I feel I'm right, if I believe in what I'm doing, then we need to listen. And everybody needs to be listened to, whoever they are, wherever they're from. There might be occasions when stories are untrue or whatever, but everybody needs to be listened to. And I think that's the message we get across when we go to do these inductions and we stand in front of people. But again, we have to ask ourselves, why don't people really understand, the senior leaders understand the benefit of this? Maybe they think we're just making it up. Maybe they think we're just trying to make loads and loads of money and whatever. And I think it does come across very quickly, because people always approach us after the inductions and they say, wow, we really feel confident to tell you because we think we can trust you. And I said, well, the proof will be in the pudding. We do know what we're doing. We can protect information. We can protect individuals if they have that courage to speak up. So I think it's the skills that we learnt in the police service and that commitment to delivering what we learned. And I spent many years, when Shaun and I had a cup of coffee in Surrey and said, look, I think we can we can make a difference of this. I was thinking about the many years of working with victims of crime where, as an organisation, we didn't listen to them, particularly victims of serious sexual offences. We didn't believe them. We didn't think it was in our power to investigate them, or there wasn't sufficient this or sufficient that. So that listening came back to me as a big reason to move this forward. And also I felt, well, if you approach it in the right way and people do believe in you, and I always felt, question us, dig in the detail. We're not making this up. We want to make a difference. So I always felt that if I could have the opportunity to speak to people, I could make them feel confident that we wouldn't let them down. We wouldn't maybe go that extra mile and do what we had to do, which used to be a very significant thing in the early years of policing. You'd always try to do the right thing, try to listen to people. And that was That's what made us believe, between the two of us, that we could really make that difference. To say it was a struggle is an understatement, because we're not health professionals in the care sector where we wanted to help the vulnerable adults. It was tough because everyone sort of said, well, what do you know? And we didn't want to live by the fact we just know what we're talking about because we're police officers. We're retired people. We like people. We like people to feel safe. We want to protect. We've had a life of protecting people. So the journey was tough, but eventually people realised, by virtue of the unique way we did it, building relationships, there was a lot in it. It made a difference. And now we're across all sorts of sectors. But the message has still got to get out there that reasons people don't speak up are vast, and it could be something very simple. But I ask maybe your listeners and yourself, think of that time in your working life or even at school occasion when you weren't listened to, or you felt something was going on and nothing could be done about it. Those occasions, I think most people can have an example of that. And that was the sort of the message that we got back from a lot of firefighters, a lot of care workers, a lot of care staff, a lot of people in the catering industry, and so on and so forth.
Love listening to that, Paul and Shaun. And I think everything you say is just so true of everybody, across industries, across sectors. And one of the things that we as IOIC, and we really are trying to work, and we think that connection and care is so important, and relationships and how we think about that and the conversation and what it can unlock is so, so powerful. And I can think of many, and it's just the damage when you, as you said, Paul, when you're not listened to, it stays with you. You give up. You feel this sense of, what's the point? No one cares. No one's interested.
What's a really big part of that, Jen, and it's so important, is that then people think that because you don't listen to them, you're judging them. And that judgment of who you are and what you are. And you could be the kindest, nicest person in the world, but if you're not listened to, suddenly you can end up doubting yourself. And funnily enough, I've had this conversation with someone that we work with this morning, a young man that we work with the charity side of things. And, he said to me, what I like about having a coffee with you, Paul, is that you don't judge me. You don't judge me. And I told him the story about his parents that fell short, and everyone blamed his parents, and that he had to come into care and everything. And I said, you know what? I don't even judge your parents. Why would I want to judge your parents? I want to listen to your parents. But I think in society, in businesses that are hypad, that judgment bit happens too quickly. We don't listen enough. The power of silence is a wonderful thing, but you have to have confidence to be silent. Shaun and I have stood up in front of lots of different people, lots of our clients, and having the confidence not to say something, and you can feel their confidence growing, and you can feel them wanting to speak, but don't speak before they speak, and then suddenly the relationship's off, and it's ignited. And all of a sudden, there's a respect and non-judgmental and trust, and that's where we get our success, I believe. Sorry, I've probably gone on a little bit too much now.
No, you haven't, not at all, Paul. And I think that's the thing about instilling the art of listening and conversation and trust is you don't want to enter that with a fear that it has a consequence, that it's going to negatively impact you in some way. But also when it's unlocked, the power of difference that can make is immense. And I worry that we've become so separate from each other and we haven't focused in those relationships. And I think that so many systems and processes have been put in place when we haven't really built in just ground earth. Look, you talk to me. I ain't going to judge you. We're all good. Tell me what's on your mind. Let me help you out.
Yeah. And I think that what we've also found is that enabling speak up, those two little words, speak up, actually are so more powerful than those two words actually tell you. Because if you can speak up in any organisation or in any part of life, then what you're doing is you're including that person in the business, and you're making them feel included, and you're giving them respect. Okay. If you don't have a good speak up service, I would suggest in any organisation, then you are operating effectively partially blind, because there's stuff going on in that organisation that I know you won't know about, because people are fearful of speaking up, usually direct to their employer. They don't want to speak up direct because they're worried, even though much of what they worry about possibly won't happen, because a lot of it is a perceived fear. So some of it is what they fear may well happen in some organisations, but in many organisations, if they spoke up, possibly they would be treated okay. But because of social media and because you just Google, and I hate this word, Google whistleblowing, and you just get loads and loads of bad examples of what goes badly wrong. We don't hear about the times when people whistleblow and it all happens fine. So there's this big perception of fear and the actual threat of it actually happening that puts people off. And that really means that leaders of organizations are running their organizations partially blind. And that means they can't improve. They don't know what's going wrong to improve it. So therefore, we're actually creating a mechanism that creates improvement and create what we're now saying is it creates excellence. Because if you can identify and take away what's going wrong in an organization, you're enabling a positive culture to emerge. You're enabling the best possible performance to emerge. And therefore, people are then more willing to put forward suggestions, even compliments, which maybe otherwise wouldn't happen. As Paul said, relationships improve, relationship between individuals, relationships between teams improve. And suddenly you're creating an excellent organization. And it all stemmed from just getting communication right at the end of the day, you know?
And I'll pass on to Canny, but as you talk, because I agree with everything that you just said wholeheartedly. So what are the things that, in your experiences, that you do that enables that fear to break down, to feel like we can get past this and we can enable that sense of getting over why it's so hard for people to speak up?
So much of that links back, Jen, to that initial encounter where we say to the organiser, this is us, this is who we are. You need to get to know us, because if you don't trust us, you're not going to use our platform. And look at our social media background. We don't do vast social media, LinkedIn, but scope what we've done, what we've tried to achieve. I would suggest there's a huge consistency there around the work that we both do in the charity sector, in trying to make a difference. And it's openness, isn't it? It's transparency. I think one of the things that always goes down quite well, we get a bit of a wry smile, is when they ask about, they're a bit sceptical, some people, whether it be care sector, film sector, or firefighters or police or whatever, is we say we're not going to turn up to deliver these inductions in a Bentley. We're not going to make loads of money out of this. This is about trying to achieve some sort of progress in the workplace to keep people safer. And it always goes down quite well. And I think, again, it's the relationship. It's that bit about trust us. Let's try, see what happens. And some of the things we say specifically in that induction can negate a lot of concerns right at the very beginning. The one that springs to mind is the fact that we can guarantee that what you say, young man or young lady, is that information will get to the top of the organisation. It will get there to the top of the organisation safely by virtue of our platform and how we operate. And you will get a reply. You will get some feedback. When you sort of put that out there, compared to what has gone on before, you can see them think, well, I need to give this a chance. I need to, because that's more progress than we've ever had. Because you look at the research around speaking up, people say, one thing, we weren't listened to, two, we never got any feedback, three, nothing ever happened. But we can show those first bits of positivity, which we often drop into the beginning of that conversation to get people's attention. So it is understanding sort of the behaviour, understanding what the needs are, and it's understanding speak up, particularly from my point of view, from my own experience. Is this a situation where if something very difficult was spoken about within a confined, secure environment, would the organisation protect their corporate image before they protect this individual? It's a tough thing to mention, but it's reality. People will protect their corporate reputation or their own job before, but to the detriment of someone that has the courage to speak up. Try and balance that in your own mind. I know where we fall on that very clearly. So,
I mean, it's a really interesting conversation, isn't it? Because you've been up and running for 10 years. When I think back and cast my mind back, when I don't have the best memory, but I can think of specific events that have made major media headlines, which absolutely failings in the adult care sector, failings in, the nuclear sector. You mentioned the word whistleblowing. I know there's been lots of controversy there, Shaun, over the last few years. There are specific events. I mean, dramas have been made about these things, haven't they? I mean, there's no shortage of stories. And I wonder about, I'm assuming, and you'll have to tell me, I'm assuming that some organisations contact you because they want to proactively make sure that they never find themselves in a situation where there is this negative fallout. And of course, there will be others, presumably, that have experienced the negative fallout, and it's the aftermath that you are called in to help somehow resolve. Aside from the human collateral damage, which I am not underplaying in any way, shape, or form. I really am not. I think there will be people listening to this podcast episode thinking, well, do you know what? That doesn't really apply to us because we don't look after people in the sense of we're not caring for people. We're not, a healthcare provider or a educational setting or a whatever. What are some of the negative impacts that you have witnessed in settings that you've gone into where people have felt unable to speak up? They felt like their voice is just eviscerated.
I'll give you some examples, some broad examples that we've come across. So even in the 2020s, silo thinking is very present in medium-sized to large organisations where you have, let's say, IT, HR, buildings and maintenance, transport, or where you sort of have the specialisms within the wider, but they're all there to support the operational teams. And what we found actually in a number of examples is those silos develop their own priorities and do things at their own, let's say, convenience, although I don't think it's meant that way, but they develop in that way, rather than actually supporting the people on the front line who need things immediately. They will do it at their rate and at their what they assess to be important. But of course, they are there primarily to make sure the people run effectively on the front line. So that is a detrimental thing, because I don't think, unless you have something like us, where we've had several examples where we have reports of that sort of thing happening, where it's gone back to the silo to say, can you please fix this? And they've said, well, we can't do it for 3 weeks or 3 months or whatever because of this, that, and the other. But then when they put a say-so in, it goes to the top of the organisation, and the chief fire officer or the CEO says, no, of course we can sort this out. We can't let this operational risk run on. And it just needs a higher level of management to sort it out. So that is particularly of interest. And then, of course, don't forget, mental health and well-being of staff as well. We were first approached or made connections in the fire service with a chief fire officer who very much on the forefront of his mind was, I need some way of my staff reporting mental health trauma or mental health crisis of some sort. And don't forget, this is a fire service, and this is about 6 months after the Grenfell tragedy. So on his mind was thinking, wow. And don't forget as well, fire services have been predominantly male orientated. It's changing, but they have predominantly male. And therefore, I think some men still find it uncomfortable to talk to other men about their mental health issues, for fear that A, they wouldn't be supported, or even B, ridiculed. Oh, he's mad, or whatever whatever the banter might be. And so the chief forester we spoke to then was conscious that he wanted a system where, yes, he wants things reported as we do, but he was particularly wanting something where the staff could confidentially say, hey, I need some help. I don't want my colleagues to know that I need some help, but I want the organisation to reach out to me confidentially because I'm going through a bit of a crisis. Or I've noticed firefighter blogs has said a few things that I'm concerned about. I think the organisation needs to reach out to that firefighter to give them some support confidentially. And that's sometimes, in some scenarios, that's difficult to do if you were just told, well, go and see the head of HR about that, or do it all internally. It's very difficult to do.
I would add to that, I would say it's an unfortunate truth that in a lot of corners, people at work feel that HR represents the organisation and not their best interests. That's the first point. But the other point is, I'm tracking the work of some really sharp psychologists who specialise in HR burnout. And since the pandemic, because so many organisational issues are of people in nature, you think about shifting attitudes towards work, you think about hybrid working, demand for hybrid working, demand for remote working, you think about, just changes in expectations, and HR as a discipline, as a function of business, is at really great risk of burnout itself. I would conjecture that there's burnout rates in business, in industry, are far higher than we might imagine. Those ladies have done excellent work in uncovering the truth behind what's going on in HR. But if you were to apply the same rigor to, I don't know, any aspect of business, I think you would find the same. I certainly know that we're aware of it for internal communication because it's a sad reality that traditional business thinking is that where there is economic uncertainty, you cut budgets. And people are being expected to do more and more and more with less and less and less without clear messaging around what the strategic vision and mission is of the business, etc. So there's a whole host of things going on there. This piece around prioritizing, listening and active listening where my job is to bear witness to what you have to say rather than plan my response before you have finished talking, because that is not active listening. That's a massive, massive priority for most organisations now. And not many of us are very gifted in that field. I think we've all got the talent, but we need to flex the muscle.
It's so true what you say, Kat, there. And it really resonates with us, massively. And Shaun and I, funny enough, had a conversation this morning when we were talking about the company and the strategic progress that we want to make by doing a particular type of comms. And going back to the HR piece, we struggled in the early stages to get HR departments to realise we weren't a threat to them. We were trying to support them. We were actually taking work off of their busy schedule. And it's very important to us to remember how we really started, because that chief fire officer said, I want this for our mental health. We weren't particularly ready to develop into the fire sector because we were focused on the care sector. But then the first thing he did, he said, well, can you present to us what you do? And I went along and presented, and I was introduced to a lady who was the director of HR and who's become a fantastic advocate for us and over the years. And you could tell that there was a little bit of pushback. But eventually, because one of her greatest skills was that she listened to the detail and she really listened to what we were trying to achieve. She then bought into the platform and what we were trying to achieve. And we started with that organisation, and it's just gone on and on and on from there. It was that individual at a senior level of HR having the courage to listen and be open about what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve our staff to feel confident about speaking up, because we know we've got problems. We know we've got challenges. That was a real turning point for us right at the beginning, probably in the second or third year of Say So starting. And if I could you talked about just quickly an example, one of the examples that we often use, that we asked the individuals going back quite a few years, around what's the impact of not speaking up. We had an example in our very early days, and one, say, we've mentioned before because we've spoken to the individual and asked that we can, but it was to do with a firefighter who actually couldn't reach a piece of very important equipment at a certain height within a fire appliance. Now, that might seem quite innocuous to some people, but this individual was genuinely concerned initially that under pressure in an emergency, they might fall short of supporting their staff and their role in a very serious incident. So it was really upsetting this individual, and then they reported it and mentioned it discreetly because they didn't want it to be reflected on the fact that they were maybe a little bit shorter than the average firefighter. But there was ridicule from colleagues, and this individual was getting to a point where they were thinking, all I want to do is be a firefighter, a good firefighter. I want to be recognised to be a good, but I can't reach that bit of equipment. I'm going to let someone down. I'm going to let myself down. And it became a really emotional problem for that individual. But they collared us on a day we went to do an induction and said, is this the sort of thing you're talking about? And we said, of course it is. Of course it is. Went through the system, cut a very long story short. The organisation was so in tune that the design of the appliances was changed to cover that situation never happening again. And that is the progress of one particular practical operation example of what Say So does. Because if we hadn't have been there, I hate to think of the emotional situation that individual might have been in. Might have even left the organisation for something that could have been solved very quickly. And there was a bit of an education piece in relation to taking a mickey out of a member of staff for their height. It's not right. It's wrong. It shouldn't be done. Just because someone's shorter than the next individual doesn't mean to say they won't be great at their job. So that was a really good example that we often talked about in our early stages.
And they did a whole review across their service around where things were stored as a result of that. So it created change across the service. So we are very, very pleased and proud that, as I say, that those two words, speak up, doesn't just mean one incident at a time being dealt with. We're now building up data and we are creating change across many organisations, change for the good. I don't know of an organisation that has, let's say, more than, 20, 30, 40 staff. If you're an owner of an organisation, you can't keep tabs on what's going on. You can't get to know what feelings people have on a day-to-day basis because you're not with them 24 hours or 8 hours a day or whatever. Because if you've got more than 20 or 50 staff, you need an independent, impartial speak-up service to fill that gap of information that you're not getting. And that information you're not getting will help you run your business better, is basically what we're saying.
I shudder to think of the volumes of people that leave jobs that they would have liked to have performed well in because they did not feel listened to. The amount of turnover that must take place. And we have some data, don't we? Because we know we have engagement data. So Gallup performs its global state of the global workplace every year. We know that the UK in particular is circling the drain. It's 33rd out of 38 countries for engagement. Engagement sits at 10%. And we also know, because of the amazing research undertaken by David MacLeod and Nita Clark back in 2009, which was commissioned by UK government after the financial crash, we know that there are 4 enablers of engagement, all of which are fundamentally communication-based, and voice is one of those. Voice, giving space to allow somebody to speak out, whether that's, I think the organisation would be better if we did this, or, oh my goodness, red flag, this is happening over here, and if we don't pay attention and seek to remedy it, it's going to be catastrophic, or whatever it is. Voice is a really important thing, and it does make me think, how many people leave good opportunities every single year because they just don't feel that their opinion matters.
And so I think what strikes me is listening to all of it, and I think we're all kind of in fierce agreement here, is what worries me is how organisations see listening and speaking up as a risk when it's a powerful opportunity. And why is that fear of well, if we listen, what will that tell us? Whereas actually, if you listen, what it will tell you is amazing things you can fix.
Yeah. And also, what you must also remember is the leadership teams, though they might be experienced, though they might have done the job years ago or whatever and made their way up, they don't have a monopoly on good ideas. The good ideas come from anywhere and can come from any. There's great people working in every organisation that can have some ideas. It's just about getting those ideas out, getting the concerns that they have out, and then managing them. We don't force our organisations to do exactly what our concerns raise. They can consider them, they can research, and then they can decide what happens. But the great thing of what we always encourage is the individual that's raised that concern or made that suggestion gets some feedback. So they're respected and they can feel that they've contributed to the business at the end of the day.
One of the things that we've struggled with right at the very beginning was to establish the independence. And when we first started, that was the key thing. Get people to understand independence. No, I'm not going to have someone else running or telling us what goes on in our organisation. That's not right. We don't need that. Secondly was anonymity. It was the next big challenge for us. Anonymity, anyone can say what they like about anyone. We're not having that. So we had to then teach people and educate people how to manage anonymous information, drawing on our skills from our previous world and also from our skills, post-retirement. Then the next bit was to convince people, when you have that concern, independent investigation. That was a key part, to convince people that as a result of a serious concern that was raised, then investigate it independently, and your outcome outcome will be so much better. And the way that your organisation is reflected on will be so much better because it will be open and impartial and transparent. And thirdly, our current big challenge is linking one element of speaking up to safeguarding, because many safeguarding professionals with lots and lots of experience are reluctant to link good speak up to being able to safeguard better. This is a real challenge for us. And again, why some of the conversations Shaun and I are having this morning about have we got our messaging right? But we did a bit of research in the very early days about anonymous information. If you've got all the information you can get, you can safeguard better. Because if you accept anonymity produces more reported concerns or things that, or gives more confidence for people to speak up, then you can manage a bigger picture. Does that make sense? The safeguarding element of it, you say you've got an anonymous reporting platform. They've taken that away. And some people tried to take it away. And we said, no, you can't take it away. This is how we operate. But if you accept that anonymity brings more concerns, why would you not have it and include it? Because you know you're getting more information. You could have details of something that wasn't mentioned before or didn't know about it because someone felt confident to speak anonymously about it. So that connection with safeguarding is another challenge for us to get people to understand that you can safeguard better if you have an anonymous, impartial reporting platform where people feel really comfortable. We'll tell you what's going on just in relation to the safeguard issue, not necessarily operational things that have no safeguarding issues, not necessarily efficiency, but just safeguarding. Have that confidence to speak up and you will safeguard better.
Our listeners are in the business of internal communications. We have many members in public sector organisations, charity organisations, healthcare organisations, fire services, and so police forces, etc., as well as big corporate organisations that see that listening and all the things that we're talking about are so critical. So how can they help, I guess, create that psychological safety? What role can internal communication play in building that space of safety at work?
Well, I think first of all, and what we always look for is you do need total buy-in from every element of the organisation. So if the leadership come to us and say, look, we'd like you. One of the things that we say is, look, please don't treat it as a tick box exercise. Don't treat it, oh yeah, we've got a speak up service. Thank you very much. Look how good we are. It's more than that. It's about getting the comms right. It's getting, and one of the things that we do when we launch with a new member organisation, we will try to speak to all levels of management so that they get it, because some of those managers might feel vulnerable. They may feel people are going to speak up about me or what I do. But what we try to do is make sure what we're telling them, what we're trying to achieve is we're not on anybody's side. We just want things to be better at the end of the day. And if we can expose some issues that people have and get them dealt with, as I said earlier, the organisation benefits from that. So it's about making sure all the managers at every level get to understand what say-so is or what independent speak-up is, and also obviously we get out to speak to the staff. And I don't think anybody else does that, actually. There's a few organisations doing speak up, but we wrap up going to speak to staff as part of our service. And we feel that is a fundamental ingredient that cannot be foregone. It's something that's got to happen. Yeah, it's got to happen. Because it actually, as we said earlier, they can see the whites of our eyes. They can see what the passion that we have. They can test us and ask us questions. We can explain how we keep them safe and how we sanitize the stuff so that even if they're anonymous, we take out anything that could identify them by people who know the rotas and all that sort of thing, because we're very used to doing that. So I think the main thing is, briefing all the management levels and that human interaction with the staff.
Which is absolutely a topic that is very, very close to the heart of this podcast, keeping work human and prioritising the delicacy of human interrelationships. So as we close out another fascinating conversation, what one thing would you like to convey to internal communicators in terms of how they might be able to take what you've outlined in today's conversation a way to add strategic value to their employer, what one thing would you like to impart, which I appreciate is a loaded question, but one thing?
I'd like to see, going back to some of our conversations right at the beginning, I'd like to see leaders being a bit kinder. It may sound sensitive and it may sound oversensitive or a bit strange coming from a retired police officer, who started his career in the 80s, but be a bit kinder, because you'll be amazed. Don't judge people, be open and listen to what they've got to say. And most of the time you'll really get to the root cause of what's going on, or what the root cause of the issue are. So to me, kindness, and that's why that presentation, that going back to the very beginning, had such an impact on me, because that's the reality. We need to be a bit kinder in the workplace and be accountable for causing, upset, and that could then go on at home and then could deteriorate and people go off. Just be a bit kinder and be a bit more open and give people the opportunity to speak up.
My one thing, if you ask me one thing, is there are some hard-nosed business people out there who run businesses, I won't say purely for a financial, but driven mainly by a financial reason. And I would say to them, the one thing you've got to realise from Speak Up is it creates a better business and therefore saves you money at the end of the day on many, many fronts. So for those hard-nosed business people out there, please remember, a good Speak Up service basically saves wastage and therefore saves you money.
Yeah. I mean, I think wholesale, systemically, we have to rethink the purpose of business. And I love your point, your reference about kindness, Paul, because if we were to prioritise kindness in how we relate to all of our stakeholders, whether they're internal, external, whether they're customers, whether they're governance bodies, whether they're, membership bodies, whatever they are, kindness goes a massive long way towards goodwill, reciprocity, collaboration, cooperation, and ultimately it's what underpins a healthy, well-functioning society. And I think we absolutely, as an imperative, have to prioritise kindness, because I don't like to think of the alternative if we continue down the road that we're going.
And everyone's screaming out for it.
Yes.
Everyone is saying, just give me some more humanity and some more care and some more, and let me be seen and heard. And we know it. Yeah. The evidence is there.
And when you are as well, and I use this just very quickly, I use this when trying to encourage people to foster children, in the fostering world, where they're struggling to get foster carers. Don't be ashamed of the fact that what it does to you to change a young child's life, it empowers you because you have been kind. It makes you feel better because you've been able to be kind to a young child. You've been able to support them. Don't be afraid to say that. Yeah, it is about the children, but you're developing yourself as an individual because you're putting yourself out there to look after the vulnerable in the community. So kindness is so important, I believe.
Love that. Thank you so much, guys, for coming and chatting with us today. I think there's lots of work to do, but it all starts with healthy conversation. So thank you very, very much for your time, and look forward to chatting to you again at some point.
Nice to meet you both, Jen, Kat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much enjoyed it. Goodbye now.
Thanks for listening today. If you like what you've heard, please like and follow us wherever you access your podcasts.